For 3,000 years, one civilization pretty much defined the ancient world. They left behind this incredible legacy of pyramids, god kings, and a deep, deep connection to the afterlife that, honestly, still fascinates us today. This is the story of ancient Egypt, a world built from river mud, massive stone, and just pure, unshakable belief.
Okay, let's dive right in. If you really want to get a handle on this topic for an exam, you need a roadmap. So we're going to break this huge civilization down into 5 key parts. We'll start with the geography, then walk through their political history, their beliefs about death, their amazing invention of writing, and finally, we'll look at the blueprint of their whole society. If you can get these 5 points down, you are going to have a super solid foundation for any question that comes your way.
So, first things first, we have to start exactly where the Egyptians started, with the river. It is literally impossible to understand anything about Egypt without first understanding the absolute foundation of it all, the Nile.
You've probably heard this famous line from the Greek historian Herodotus. And, it's not just some poetic saying. It is the absolute fundamental truth of ancient Egypt's existence. The river wasn't just important, it was the civilization.
Now, what's wild is that this whole civilization was basically born out of a climate crisis. Early humans were just nomads, wandering around in the highlands, but then a massive drought hit, turning that land into the desert we see today. They were forced down into the Nile Valley to find water, and it was there, in that rich, black soil, that they figured out agriculture. And that changed absolutely everything. They stopped wandering, they settled down, built villages, and started to build a whole new world. And the Nile was so much more than just a source of water. Its annual flood was super predictable, and it brought this fresh layer of fertile silt that made their agriculture possible. They actually worshipped the flood as a god named Hapi. It even structured their entire idea of time. The flood's arrival was their New Year's Day. Their whole calendar was based on the river's 3 seasons: flooding, planting, and harvesting. And of course, it was their main highway, connecting the entire kingdom and making all their trade possible.
Okay, so let's shift gears and look at the timeline. We're going to see how this civilization rose, fell apart, and then was reborn over and over again across thousands of years. This rhythm is the heartbeat of Egyptian history.
Now, this timeline might look a little complicated, but the main takeaway here is actually really simple. Just look for the pattern. You see these periods of incredible strength and unity, those are the kingdoms. And they're always followed by periods of collapse and chaos, those are the intermediate periods. This cycle of boom and bust, unity and division, repeats itself and really defines the entire political story of Egypt. The Old Kingdom was Egypt's first great peak, and it was all about one thing: stability. The king wasn't just a ruler, he was seen as a living god on earth. His power was absolute. And it's that strong, centralized authority that made it possible to organize the thousands of workers and all the resources needed to build something as insane as the Great Pyramids. So after the chaos of that first intermediate period, the Middle Kingdom kings had to basically glue Egypt back together again. They reunified the country, but they also learned a major lesson. They went out of their way to cut down the power of regional governors to make sure another collapse wouldn't happen. And they focused really heavily on practical things like the economy and building a professional army to keep the state secure. And then we get to the New Kingdom. This is Egypt in blockbuster mode. This is the age of empire. You have these legendary warrior pharaohs like Thutmose III and Ramesses the Great who pushed Egypt's borders out and created a superpower that dominated the whole region. This era brought in just unbelievable wealth, total military dominance, and some of the biggest, most mind-blowing construction projects in human history. So this right here is the crucial point, the core tension of their history. During the kingdoms, you have one unified Egypt with a powerful king who can build things like pyramids and temples. But during the intermediate periods, that central power just shatters. The country splits apart, local governors basically become their own kings, and civil war breaks out. If you can understand this constant push and pull between unity and chaos, you've really understood Egyptian history. All right, to really, truly get inside the mind of an ancient Egyptian, we have to talk about their central obsession: what happens after you die. I mean, their entire civilization was basically designed to ensure a safe and successful journey into the afterlife.
And you can see this obsession in how their tombs evolved. It was all driven by one single goal: protect the body so the soul could live forever. It starts with just a simple pit in the sand. Then that evolves into the mastaba, which is a more permanent rectangular building. Then some genius architect gets the idea to stack these mastabas on top of each other, creating the step pyramid. And finally, they perfect the design into that iconic, smooth-sided true pyramid we all know.
But it wasn't just about the building. Inside the king's pyramid, the walls were covered with these magical spells, what we call the pyramid texts. You can think of them as a divine cheat sheet, or maybe an instruction manual for the king's soul to help him get past all the dangers of the underworld and join the gods. And this was strictly a royal, VIP-only kind of thing.
But after the Old Kingdom fell apart, something really interesting happened. In the Middle Kingdom, those powerful spells that were once only for kings started to become available to nobles and other wealthy people. They began writing them on the inside of their coffins. We call these the coffin texts, and this represents a massive change. Historians call it the democratization of the afterlife. Suddenly, getting to heaven wasn't just for kings anymore.
By the time we get to the New Kingdom, this idea goes even further. Now, if you had the money, you could buy a personalized scroll made of papyrus that had a whole collection of spells, what we call the Book of the Dead. It was your own personal guidebook for the underworld, designed to help you pass the final terrifying judgment, the weighing of your heart, and make it safely into the eternal afterlife. Okay, so all of these super complex spells and religious ideas had to be written down, right? And that leads us to one of Egypt's absolute greatest achievements, the invention of writing. It was a tool that not only let them map out their path to eternity, but also helped them run a massive empire right here on Earth.
Now, their writing wasn't just one single system. It evolved over time. It started with hieroglyphs, those beautiful, detailed, secret inscriptions you see carved on monuments. But for writing letters or keeping records, that was way too slow. So they developed a faster cursive script called hieratic. And for really quick, everyday stuff, that got simplified even more into a script called Demotic. The final stage was Coptic, which actually used the Greek alphabet and is still used today in the Coptic Church.
For centuries, all of this writing was a complete and total mystery. The ability to read these ancient texts was totally lost to time. So the question is, how in the world did we crack the code? How did we learn to hear the voices of the ancient Egyptians again? Well, the answer came from this single incredible discovery, the Rosetta Stone. The reason it was so important is that it had the exact same royal decree written in 3 different scripts. 2 of them were the Egyptian ones we couldn't read, hieroglyphic and Demotic. But the third one was Ancient Greek, a language that scholars could read. So by comparing the known Greek text to the unknown Egyptian texts, a genius named Jean-François Champollion was finally able to decipher the hieroglyphs. And just like that, he unlocked 3,000 years of forgotten history.
All right, for our final section, let's zoom all the way out and look at the big picture. Let's break down the actual structure of this civilization, the blueprint of how their society was organized and how it all worked day to day. Egyptian society was a very strict pyramid. At the very, very top, you had the king, who, remember, was considered a literal god on earth. Right below him were the nobles and high officials, who actually ran the country for him. Then you had the skilled middle class, the artisans, the scribes, the soldiers. And forming the massive base of that whole pyramid were the farmers and laborers. Their work fed and built the entire nation. This rigid structure was all about maintaining stability. Everyone knew their place and their job. And this whole civilization was powered by a kind of 4-part economic engine. The absolute foundation was agriculture, all thanks to the Nile. That was supported by their access to incredible natural resources like stone for building and gold from the mines. Then you had a skilled industrial sector of craftsmen making goods. And finally, an extensive trade network brought in things they needed, like wood, and let them export their own products across the ancient world. So after 3,000 years of power, what's the big takeaway? We see a civilization built on the predictable cycle of a river, ruled by the absolute authority of a god-king, and completely focused on building a perfect afterlife. Their blueprint gave us things like the 365-day calendar and architectural wonders we still can't fully explain. Their world is long gone, but echoes of that blueprint are definitely still with us. Which leaves us with one last, really important question. What parts of our blueprint will still be around in the next 3,000 years?